the merit of the Aliyat Neshama for my father, Rav Abraham ben Eliezer, and my wife's grandmother who passed away yesterday, Rabbanit Sima Bat Harav Ben Sion, and may we all have strong seed nechama in any way that we can, and any way that we need it, whether it's personally, nationally, in our community. And may we see lots of great things b'zchut the Torah that we learn. So in this week's Parshat Vayetchanan, there are many, many pieces to it. One famous part is the beginning where Moshe kind of davens to Hashem, asking for one last chance. It's like, the final speech of Lou Gehrig, who says today, that famous speech. He gives that big speech where he wants Moshe is giving that big speech, or that 515 ways in which he's trying to, get Hashem to change his mind. This parsha is filled. Every parsha is filled, but this parsha specifically is filled with many, many great opportunities and great divrei Torah and great things, including the Aseret Dibrot, parts of Shema, 2 parshas of Shema are mentioned here. We're going to start with Jerush Yud Bet, which is number 12 in this week's parsha. Just a quick note is that in this week, this Parshat Vayetchanan is always read the Shabbat after Tisha B'Av. Vayetchanan, we always read, it's called Shabbat Nachamu because of the beginning of the 7 haftarot that start from now until Rosh Hashanah. It's called the Shivat Nechemta, 7 haftarot of consolation after the tough 3-week haftarot that were given before Tisha B'Av. Now we go into the 7 haftarot of consolation. So the first one is Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. We should be consoled in some way.
What Torah is this?
This is going to be, we're going to get to it in a second, but I was just wanting to give like a little introduction about the week. Parsha, and also this week is always, Shabbat Nachamu is always a Shabbat before Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av is, we know that the Gemara mentioned, the Mishnah mentions it in Ta'anit. The Mishnah mentions that Yom Kippur, there were no holidays like Yom Kippur and like Tu B'Av. One of the things that happened on Tu B'Av, besides the famous one, which is we know that Tu B'Av is known as the Jewish day in which people get married and people get engaged and whatever it is. It's also known in the Beit HaMikdash. It was the time when it was the end of the winter, the end of the summer period, end of summer kind of tkufa, after which they stopped collecting wood or drying out the wood, because by then the season starts to change, and you can also see it nowadays. The seasons start to turn to be, the days start getting shorter. And I thought of a new, I never saw this yet, but maybe there's someone who says it, but I thought of that the reason why now as the days get shorter and the nights get longer, they use the wood, use all the wood that they've collected throughout the summer, and this is the wood that they use until the next following summer. And as we get closer to Rosh Hashanah and throughout the year, we need to start collecting the wood that we've collected, which is what is the only thing that we know of that's Eitz. Eitz is Chaim, Eitz is Torah. So we know Eitz is Chaim. So we need to start collecting the wood now and holding on to allowing it to burn throughout the longer nights as we get through the winter, and allowing us between now and the Tkufa of gets through Elul, through Rosh Hashanah, through the whole Chagim. So Bezrat Hashem, we should start collecting our pieces of wood, and we should start allowing them to burn to keep our neshama burning throughout the next couple of months, which are always known as the tkufa of a lot of learning and a lot of avoda as we prepare ourselves for Rosh Chodesh.
Especially at night as well.
Yeah, especially at night.
So nights get longer.
Tu B'Av, what's the date that we collected wood on?
No, it's the last day in which they said from now on we stopped letting the wood dry because the summer starts getting shorter. Until the Jewish, right, so the wood.
Now we need to bring it in.
We need to bring it in, start holding on to it, so that way we can burn the flames even longer. So meaning whatever wood we collected and dried, now we need to actually use it. To use the wood that was dry throughout the summer, and now that wood would then get used throughout the winter, like the longer nights. Anyway, we are now going to do Jerush Yud Bet, number 12.
Can you just repeat for Instagram's sake the Nishmas?
Yes, tonight's learning should be Nishmat, my father, Harav Abraham ben Eliezer, and my wife's grandmother, Harabanit Sima Bat Harav ben Sion, who passed away yesterday. So may have her neshama have an aliyah. And she was a great tzedakah, and this is appropriate that we're learning about tzedakah today. She raised throughout her life. Her father, Rav Ben Zion Parchesky, was a very large. He learned in the Slobodki yeshiva in Europe,
Wow.
and then he came after he moved to America. And then when he moved to America, he was part of the. He started raising money for the Chevron yeshiva that we know, and then my wife's grandmother, continued that legacy by raising. I mean, to the best we know, we don't know an exact number, but we know that it's definitely close to the millions that she raised for the Chevron yeshiva. So Bezrat Hashem, that her neshama should have an aliyah. So it says in this week's parsha, towards the end of this week's parsha, it says Utstakati alanu ki nishmor la'asot. We should. It says that there will be a tzedakah that the way we translate tzedakah, it should mean charity. Unklus and many other mefarshim explain tzedakah as merit, meaning the word is like tzedakah. Like they use it kind of like in lieu, and instead of the word like chesed, it will be bizchut. In other words, not maybe chesed, but rather bizchut. That what we do, it will protect us.
Sometimes it's referred to as justice.
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, it's not necessarily tzedakah. We always think of tzedakah as giving charity, and most mefarshim in this case say that doesn't make sense because the context of the pasuk doesn't make sense to say charity because we're doing something. If you were to read the pasuk, it would say there will be charity for us if we're careful to perform the entire all the mitzvot. So it doesn't make sense. Charity doesn't literally. That's why Unclus translates to be a merit or a justice or something like that. So in this case, the Zera Shimshon, he asks the question, Mahu tzedakati alanu. What does it mean by the words that will be charity for us? Like we said, it doesn't necessarily. He's asking is in what way is the reward that we're meriting for performing the mitzvot, will that be a charity? In other words, the context doesn't, the word doesn't translate correctly in this context. So he offers three different explanations. So we'll go through each one of them. It's a very relatively short Torah. The next one that we do after this is even shorter. So we'll do two short ones. I think they're both very appropriate. So we'll do this one. So he says here, V'yesh lomar, we can now explain that Katuv Omer, V'haya im shamat Yishmael mitzvotai. If we were to listen to the mitzvot at the proper time, what is going to happen? V'natati metar tzechem be'ito. That's what we know is by the parsha of the second parsha of Shema, V'haya im shamoah. V'im chas shalom no nishmael mitzvotav, v'atzarat hashemayim. Right? We know that in that parsha, the second parsha of Shema, it says that if we perform the mitzvot, when we perform the mitzvot, Hashem is going to give us bracha of rain. And if we don't, what's going to happen? Hashem is going to stop the rain and maybe not stop the rain, but stop the sustenance. V'im kain im nishmor mitzvotav. If we do, it continues the Zera Shimshon. If we do that, if we observe the mitzvot, naset tzedakah la'atzmeinu. It's as if in some way we're doing our own tzedakah. What does that mean? Ki az yeh lanu mizonotenu. For then what happens? By us performing the mitzvot, Hashem gives us rain, and then it becomes like an infinite loop. Right? In other words, what happens is we perform the mitzvot, Hashem gives us rain, we have sustenance, and then we can perform more mitzvot. So it just continuously helps ourselves. Right? Let's say, God forbid, we don't listen. Right? If we don't listen to Hashem, then what happens? Then we know what's going to happen is the opposite. So the tzedakah that it says tzedakati alanu is that the tzedakah that we're doing it will be a tzedakah for us because by us performing the mitzvot, Hashem gives us rain, and that's the tzedakah because we can then perform the mitzvot and it becomes an infinite loop. So we are being charitable to ourselves. So literally, in this case, tzedakah to lanu, even though most mefarshim explain this word as some sort of merit, here the Zera Shimshon in his first explanation says it's actually mean that the tzedakah will be, meaning that by performing the mitzvot, we are being charitable to ourselves because we're paying it forward. We're investing in ourselves. So we're doing our own version of an investment, and the investment is that Hashem is going to give us more rain. By having more rain, we can then do what? More mitzvot, and therefore it just continues the cycle continues. So it's a nice way, that's the first explanation of Utstakati Alanu. The next one he says is that in certain performing of certain mitzvot will be an act of tzedakah. So what does he say? V'odef shar, Shabal Irmoz Lemai De'ita Beperak Dalad Ktuvot. In the fourth parak of Ktuvot, it says, Ashrei Shomer Mishpat Oseh Tzedakah B'chol Hit. It says a person who maintains justice, meaning maintains shomer mishpat, performs the laws and performs tzedakah b'chol, he performs righteous acts all the time, right? Hon v'osher b'veito v'tzidkato melad. And another pasuk says in Tehillim, says the person who is praised be the person, right? Hon v'osher b'veito, right? He's going to be wealthy, and he'll basically his tzedakah, his charity will last forever. What does it mean when a person says who retain his riches and gives charity? One person says, according to the one Manda Amar in the Gemara says, that this verse refers to a person who teaches Torah and studies Torah for free. There are many people who say that the Torah teacher, a person who learns Torah, should be learning it meaning should not be doing it for money. And there are some people that still teach Torah and learn Torah for free because they want they want to not have some sort of dependency on the money, because then they're really learning for money, perhaps. And so when the person who teaches and learns to teach, he's learning not only to retain the knowledge, but he's also teaching. He's doing it for free. So the charity that he's doing, he's investing in himself and he's investing in other people, right? So therefore, he says, and therefore, it says the Gemara says. Continues, he says, it says later on in the Psukim, it says, it says that I have taught you the mitzvot and the mishpatim, ma'ani b'chinam, just as I taught you, that is Hashem saying, just like I taught you the Torah for free, afatem b'chinam, so too you should be teaching, I taught you, just as I taught Torah by Hashem, Moshe was saying to Bnei Israel, just like I taught you Torah for free, meaning I didn't get money, so to Hashem, you were taught Torah I was taught Torah by Hashem for free, so too I will, you were too, that is you too, you will be, you too, meaning Moshe to Bnei Israel, you were taught free, so you should be, and therefore he's trying to tell us that we should be teaching Torah and learning Torah for free at no cost. And the Gemara continues by saying that the person who teaches and learns Torah, it should be considered considered an act of charity. So again, what the Zera Shimshon is trying to do is he's trying to give interpretations of what the word utstakati alanu. What is the tzedakah? And the tzedakah in this case he's saying is the people who learn and teach Torah for free, meaning that they do it for the sake of learning and teaching Torah. They are the ones who actually really are the real. They're like, once again, in some ways they're investing in themselves / investing in others, and by doing that, the act of chesed, the real act of chesed, which is the ultimate chesed, which is to teach Torah and to learn Torah, is considered tzedakah. Now we can understand that the pasuk that we mean, that teaching Torah, and is saying that if we teach Torah to others in the same manner in which Hashem taught us Torah, which is meaning for free, right? It would be considered an act of charity, an act of tzedakah. V'zeu tzedakah tiyalanu. That is what it means, right? Ve'imatayi, as when is this? So can you shmor la'asot kasher tzivan? If we are to be careful with the mitzvot, in the same way in which Hashem taught us the mitzvot, right? In the same way He did that to us. If once we're careful with keeping the mitzvot, the same way Hashem taught us the mitzvot, right? B'chinam. So too we should be teaching it for free, and therefore those people who teach Torah and learn Torah for free, those are the ones who are really it's really considered a tzedakah tiyalanu. It's really a tzedakah, some sort of act of charity. Finally, the Zera Shimshon presents a third option, a third approach, which the pasuk says tzedakah tiyalanu. It doesn't mean that it will be considered as though we are performing charity or tzedakah. Rather, it refers to a certain form of tzedakah that we will merit for our observance of Torah, by tzedakah that we will get for learning Torah. So what does he say here? V'od yesh lomar, continuing in Drush 12 of this part in Parshat V'etchanan, he says, we can explain the word charity or tzedakah. Da'atam nami amrina, and the Gemara in Ketubah continues. It says, Ashrei Shomrei Mishpat Osei Tzedakah B'Choleit. It says, those people who maintain justice, who perform charity all the time. What does it mean when the pasuk says? The Gemara asks, what does it mean when it's saying a person who performs tzedakah all the time? Is it really possible for a person to be performing tzedakah at all times? And this one is great for a person who is any person who's a parent or who's, who was someone's child, and everyone should be is someone's child. It says, "Is it possible for a person to perform charity at every moment?" It says rather, a person. The Gemara is saying is that a person who maintains and sustains his children when they are young. Pirish Rashi, and Rashi on the Dibur HaMatchil in Ketubot, it says Zan. He says that a person, one's children is considered literally considered a tzedakah at every moment. Meaning, when we view our children as a tzedakah, as a real act of chesed from Hashem, when we view every one of them, shetamid yom v'layla ahim alav, every one of our children is dependent on us. When we know our children, they depend on their parents, and the parents need to recognize that Hashem is giving us this wonderful act of tzedakah by giving each one of our children. We eat tzedakah, and therefore even though we do indeed support our children, and we hope that we do, it's still considered an act of charity. She'ein alav chiyuv b'hem, since the father is not legally. Again, this is maybe in the time of the Gemara, maybe nowadays it's different, but at the end of the day, we have to view that Hashem gave us this lovely gift. It's a chesed to every one of our children, and the act of charity, every father and every parent investing in their children is an act of chesed, an act of tzedakah, an act of charity. When we view it like that, it's actually something it's really beautiful. It's a beautiful concept. So lachein, now we can understand. Now the Zera Shimshon takes it up one notch, and he says, "Lachein amar katuv." This is why the Gemara, the pasuk says, "Ksha'anu osim." Now we can explain the pasuk that says, "Utzedakah tiyeh lanu." What does it say? Ksha'anu osim l'suno shel makom. When we perform the mitzvot of Hashem, niyeh k'mo banim hasomchim al shulchan avim. We will consider like children who are dependent upon their parent, on their father for sustenance. Right? We will merit when we perform the mitzvot the way we were expected to. We create a father-son relationship, a father-child relationship, in the sense that Hashem will provide us with the act of charity all the time. Meaning, first, the Zera Shimshon in this option, he first set up the situation, and the explanation by saying is that every parent is performing an act of tzedakah, if you will, to their child at all times because they're working so hard to sustain them, to provide them with things. And so he says, now when we take that understanding and we put it back into the pasuk, he's saying, when we perform the mitzvot the way Hashem wants us to, we go back into that relationship, or that form of a relationship, and therefore Hashem now, in some ways, quote unquote, it has to become, he has to give us charity. He has to, the tzedakah tiyeh lanu, tiyeh means it will be an act of tzedakah for us, meaning that by us performing the mitzvot, Hashem, then we become a father, it becomes a father-child relationship, and then we quote unquote, I don't want to say expect, but we want Hashem, we're looking for Hashem to perform the acts of charity, just like a father would constantly provide for his children, his younger children. Now he says, "Da'anu k'mo k'tanim," we are considered like minors. The gadol hasomech al shulchan aviv mikrei katan, a person, an adult, even an adult who's still reliant and dependent on his father's table and his father's money and his father's support, right? So too we rely on Hashem's needs. So just like we are any person, even a gadol, even someone who's older than bar mitzvah, we are still considered we're dependent on Hashem's, and in this case, dependent on a father. And the Zera Shimshon is implying that we're dependent on Hashem's sustenance and support. And there he says, furthermore, the gadol ve'ino yodea b'milo davua, right? And the Gemara in Gittin says that a grown-up, an adult son who is unaware of his father's affairs, meaning he doesn't really know what his father does. There's always this joke that you ask your child, what does your father do for a living? What your mother does? Even my kids who are grown up already say, I don't know what you actually do for a living. So they're saying a person who doesn't know what their father's affairs are, he's still considered a minor. Vaf anu, since we don't really understand, ein anu yodei b'milei dekutcha brichu klum. We have no understanding whatsoever of how Hashem works. Damar Rabbi Meir. As Rabbi Meir says in the first chapter, the first Gemara, first parak of Brachot, and he says, that v'chanoti et asher achon, and right, Hashem did not give Moshe. Moshe wanted to know Hashem's ways, and Hashem said, "No, I'm not doing that." Up until that, but He says, "V'chanoti et asher achon," I shall show favor to those who I choose to show favor, and I will show mercy. Right, I'll show rachmanu to those who I choose to show mercy. Afal pi she'eino hagud, those implying that even though that not only that known, not understood by us, Hashem may show someone favor and mercy, even though He seemingly is not necessarily fitting for it. Therefore, the Gemara also says something similar, and he says, "Yesh tzaddik v'tov v'tzaddik v'tov lo, tzaddik v'ralo." He says, therefore, it's the same thing. And since why they're same idea, since we don't understand the ways of Hashem, he's saying is that we are still considered minors in some way, and just like a father or a child who doesn't understand the way of their parents or what their parents do, so they're considered minors, and since they're considered minors, they're always considered dependent upon their father. So too Hashem. So there are three answers. This is the end of the first Torah. The first one, basically, the Zera Shimshon takes the pasuk at the end, towards the end of this week's parsha, and it says it should be a tzedakah. And what does that mean? Tzedakah, usually translated by most Mefarshim as a merit, meaning a merit of the fact that we do something, we'll get something in return. The Zera Shimshon offers three options or three answers. One answer is that the tzedakah that we do by performing the mitzvot is that we continuously get the tzedakah again. It's an infinite loop. One option, the infinite loop is that we perform the mitzvot, Hashem gives us bracha, as we know in the second parsha of Shema, and by us getting more bracha, we can then perform more mitzvot, and therefore just a continuous cycle. That's option one. Option two is that a person who performs mitzvot, meaning does one of the ultimate mitzvot is to teach Torah and learn Torah for free, and really does it for the pure sake of lishma. What?
L'chaim, maybe.
All right, whatever. No, I'm saying, but if someone who learns Torah and teaches Torah for free, meaning for the sake of actual for lishma, as opposed to trying to, do it for a salary, if you will, right? Those people who are doing it and learning it for real, that's the real tzedakah. Because why? Because just like Hashem taught Moshe for free, and Moshe taught us for free, so too we should constantly be emulating Hashem's ways, and by emulating Hashem's ways, which is to learn Torah for the real sake of the Torah, for the sake of the pure sake of the Torah, by doing that, we're getting the tzedakah that we get is the ability to come into that and appreciate the fact that we're getting to this ultimate level of learning, which is learning it for the sake of learning. Now, the third option, the third kind of interpretation, is that in this case, the Zera Shimshon is creating it kind of sets up a situation in which tzedakah alanu means that he says like this: a person, what kind of person can be performing mitzvot? What kind of tzedakah can a person be doing all the time? And he sets up a scenario in which a child who is dependent upon their father, in order to set up the explanation, the Zera Shimshon starts by setting the stage by saying that a father who supports their child, who supports the parent who supports their child, he says the child is always receiving tzedakah from the father. It's as if the father is continuously performing tzedakah. And so too, he says, just like a child and a father are in a relationship that's constantly tzedakah, so to us, by performing the mitzvot, we're asking Hashem to come into that relationship of tzedakah, that father-son relationship, that father-child relationship, in which we want his constant support, his constant tzedakah. We want his constant blessing. So in this case, he almost views it like the tzedakah, the word tzedakah doesn't necessarily mean charity, but rather that Hashem is performing with us this ultimate greatness and that this ultimate act of support. So tzedakah in this case, it doesn't mean charity, but in some ways it does, because the father is in some ways always performing tzedakah for those people for the children, for their younger children who are dependent on them. So therefore we're saying is by us performing the mitzvot, we're asking Hashem, okay, we're performing the mitzvot, now we want to enter this relationship. We're willingly interested in kind of entering this relationship with Hashem, He being the father, us being the child, and we want Hashem to constantly be performing the act of tzedakah to us, so that way we can receive Hashem's bracha. So that's the end of the first Torah, which was the Torah number 12. We're going to do number 13, and then we'll take a break for a few minutes after number 13, and then we'll come back and maybe we'll do one more. Okay, so according to, we're going to do number 13. It's a short one, but it has a really wonderful, one of the things that I find fascinating about the Zera Shimshon is the ability to kind of weave into so many different aspects and so many different components from so many different areas, and take concepts and bring them to life, but also kind of show a relationship between things that are not necessarily connected, or things that are drush, and then also sod, which deeper thoughts. And in this one, he happens to do just that, which is to take the melacha, some of the melachot of Shabbat, and he creates a relationship between that and the future, the Shabbat Mein Olam Haba, the future of Shabbat. So he says, it says in the Gemara in Avodah Zara, in the first parak of Avodah Zara, it says Hayom la'asotam. In this week's parsha, it says that you should be performing the mitzvot, or keeping the mitzvot and the mishpatim and all the different laws, right? Today, to perform them, meaning that the word that only in this world, meaning today, it means hayom, right? We're not tomorrow, right? V'lo l'machar. The Gemara says hayom v'lo l'machar. So he says here we should be the meaning lo machar, and here the Zera Shimshon is saying is hayom, meaning in this world, machar meaning the next world. So he says it's not the time, meaning the world to come, that is olam haba, is not the time and place for performing mitzvot. So let's explain a little bit before. Let's make a little introduction before his little question, before his little idea. The idea here is that we know that in one of the 39 melachot of Shabbat, there's a concept, there's a melacha that was called borer. Borer means that we have it's selecting, meaning that we take things that are separating two components. Usually it means we take the the good from the bad. We take the things that we want from the things we don't want, or the other way around. Either which way, that's the melacha of borer, selecting. Okay, that's usually we take two things and we try to usually we take some sort of if your example would be a ladle with a strainer. Right, you take the strainer, automatically strains two things and separates the good from the bad, or two objects. And here he's saying is borer, and then here is where the Zera Shimshon connects it to a deeper Kabbalistic concept, which is called it's called birur, right? Birur means at the time. Without going too deep into it, it says at the time of the Chet of Adam Arishon, there were sparks of holiness, nitzotzot, that were all throughout the world. And our job as people throughout the world, our job is to constantly kind of dig under and find and discover, explore and also discover the nitzotzot, so we can bring the nitzotzot back. Hey, shalom. So, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's all good. It's all good. Shalom. We're just starting another Jewish. Oh, okay, beautiful. Thank you. All right, so we're just doing Drush. We're just starting Drush Yud Gimel. So Drush Yud Gimel is where here the Zera Shimshon makes a comparison between in this week's parsha. It says Hayom la'asotam, and Hayom means today, meaning implying the Gemara in the Avodah Zarah says today, meaning in this world, versus V'lo machar la'asotam, meaning not in the world to come. So meaning that the time and place for mitzvot is now in this world. And he says, in order to explain, before we go deeper into this Torah, we were just going through the analogy between the melacha of borer, which is what we know in this world means to separate the good from the bad, and then versus the concept from the Kabbalah, which is called birur. Birur is that our job is that we have to, after the Chet Adam Arishon, basically the sparks of holiness, not that I understand all of this what it means, but we basically the nitzotzot of Kedusha that were all over, basically kind of scattered across the world, and our job
is to collect them.
To collect them, exactly. So we kind of have to do is we have, so he says through all our activities, that all we do on a daily basis, on a day-to-day basis, which is the things that we do not on Shabbat, right? Our job is we always have to do is, whether it's mitzvot, whether it's learning, whether it's davening, right? Our Jewish people, we kind of take out the tzotzot of kedusha every day from the things that are not so kadosh. And then so we're taking the borer. What are we doing? We're separating the good from the bad by learning, by dedicating time for kedusha, and by doing the dedicating time for kedusha. What are we actually doing? We're actually doing berur at the same time. So we're doing borer throughout the week. We're doing borer by separating, by kind of
Taking the good
from the bad, right? But
Which
we're
is
also
what you're not allowed to do on Shabbat.
exactly on the world. Exactly, very good. So he says here. So we're doing in Drush Yud Gimel of Parshat V'Etchanan, and he says Hatam al Zehu. The reason that we are limited to perform the mitzvot only in this world, which we said Hayom B'lo L'Machar, and Yud Gimel 13. Hikar Kiyuma Mitzvot Hu Levarer Hatov Mehara. The main mitzvah, the main purpose of mitzvot is to what? Is to constantly to select the good from the bad. Meaning that we're trying to take out, extract the sparks of holiness and kedusha from the things that are attached to it, the klipot. Va'olam haba nikra Shabbat. Now the world, we know that the world to come, that is the olam haba, is considered called Shabbat. Exactly. Va'borer b'Shabbat chayav mitah. A person who performs the milacha of borer on Shabbat is considered what is chayav mitah. If so, just as the malacha of borer is asur in Shabbat in this world, so too, according to this, if we say the berur, according to the Kabbalah, then it would be Shabbat, it would be asur in olam haba. So he's just taken what are we not allowed to do in this world? Borer. We're not allowed to do that on Shabbat. So he says same thing when we have on Shabbat, meaning in the world to come, in the future, we're not allowed to do berur. Okay. So Omnam ha'olam hazeh, even though this world, shehem yimei achol, that is the weekday, every day of the week, which are the time and place for getting ready for Shabbat, right? Our whole life, everything we do this week, or throughout the week, not just this week, but everything we do throughout this week, during the 6 days of the week, right? Mitzvah levarer kol ma shetzarich liyom Shabbat. What is our job? It's always to prepare and to select and to fine tune and to find things towards performing the mitzvot we're only preparing for we're preparing ourselves for the olam haba. That is Shabbat in the future. And so the question is, how do we make the malacha of borer is usually done with a tool, but what tool do we know? What tool do we use to be ruler? That is to do this fine tuning, this fine selection. He says, we know what's the main way to do borer. We need to use some sort of utensil, right? How do we find? The question is, how do we know what's right and what's wrong? What's the good thing to be doing and not the good thing to be doing? So he says, Kach ikar haberur na'aseh Torah. He says the primary method of performing this berur to really understand what the true essence of something is through the Torah. He says, Shaita kli umanuto shel kadosh baruch hu b'vriat olam. This is the only tool that Hashem gave us, with which He created the world. Hashem created the world with the Torah, and the Torah. So what he's saying is that the Torah is also the tool. Not only is it the ultimate gift that Hashem gave us, but it's the ultimate tool for us to perform this high level of understanding and getting down to the source. Therefore, and thereby we kind of are slowly using the Torah to get closer and closer to the world to come. So that way we're ready, when we're ready to we find the sparks of holiness through the acts of Torah, and that's why, by the way, one of the reasons why we're obligated to not only learn Torah, but also to listen to Torah from great people and ask Rabbanim, because their ability to learn Torah and to get to the essence of things allows them to understand questions that we may have, and by them hearing the things, and they can really filter out and understand what you're trying to ask, and that allows us to say is that by performing the mitzvot of, if you will, is trying to get to the performing the mitzvot well in this world, we're then also able to do is get closer to the world to come in the Shabbat. So we're going to take a break for 2 minutes or something. And
So
then we'll do
Borer is like clarification.
right, exactly. Right. Borer is literally separating, and berurim is to really kind of clarify and to understand.
Who means by here?
Right.
To fix up like mitzosa sparks.
Right.
Clarifying
Okay.
sparks.
Okay, so Okay,
Sounds good.
so that's number, okay, we're gonna do in a few minutes, we'll do in a minute or two, we'll do Jerush bet number 2. Let's see how this smells delicious.
Homemade.
Well done.
Wow.
First time. I'm not gonna lie. First time.
You smoke it?
No.
No? You put on there.
Nice.
Yeah, sure.
But it has a little bit like the flavor from put a little water, spices, put in
Delicious.
in a glass thing.
Wait, you ate that?
Yeah.
You could learn more than just Zera Shimshon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What number piece of meat is this?
I
Where'd you buy it from?
bought it from Club of Clan.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
That was great.
Very good.
Jerusalem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Couple of times it's on.
Anagripas.
Agrippas and Hila, and where the Mashbir was.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Very good.
It's a famous place. Good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff there.
We've got some good peppercorns on there.
I love peppercorns. I love peppercorn steak, like a fillet like that, you know?
Mm.
It's my favorite.
What are you doing, brewer? You're cleaning all the windows of Eretz
Oh, yeah? No, is that you clean windows?
That and, yeah, that's the second job.
What's the first job?
HVAC, heating, cooling,
Oh.
refrigeration in America.
In America? So you go to America a lot?
No, I can do it remotely on the computer.
Amazing.
You
I
can.
use accounts for the company.
You're most of the machine.
Ah.
You can run everything. You know, you've got.
No,
companies
but you
that
actually,
suite.
you run the accounts. You don't actually,
Not account, no, I'm not accountant, I run.
I'm
account
saying,
manager.
no, I understand.
Yeah,
I understand.
yeah,
I thought you were installing them.
no, no.
What are these?
He's that talented. He can do it. Yeah.
What is this?
And
What is it?
refrigeration,
Oh,
AC units, commercial.
New Shlomo, you want to come sit?
Think
It's
you
all
got it.
right.
I think
He's
he's,
gonna fall asleep by now.
what's he doing that?
he's hopping a little sloof.
Sorry.
Yeah, I
How
start,
many people went to Shirim just to go sleep?
you know, I once had a Rebbe who said, you know, he had the problem that a lot of people fall asleep in Shir. And he said, what happens when you sleep or take a nap? You take a nap, you usually can hear things that are going on. So it's at least they're listening in some way.
Something's
Right. Something's going in. Right.
Shama understands.
I would close my eyes to still understand what's going on, but a couple times the rabbi in high school closed his eyes and he fell asleep when he was teaching.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen such stories.
I'm like, there must be something else going on that he's falling asleep.
Okay.
Yeah, work hard.
All right, so we're going to do Drush Bet, number 2. This one is a little bit more relevant, a lot more kind of, I don't want to say standard, but it's a little bit more of a relation, kind of related to a lot more common about things that come up out of the first two are a little bit less common divrei Torah that are associated with Parshat V'etchanan. This one is a little bit more traditional, if you will, in that regard, because this week's Parshat V'etchanan, we know that Moshe Daven are, you know, kind of really threw in I hate to use the word Hail Mary, but he threw in everything. It wouldn't be appropriate to use the word Hail Mary, but he threw in everything. He said, I'm going to give one more effort to see if that maybe Hashem will let him get into Eretz Yisrael. But Hashem not only did not, at the end, Hashem did request, in some way he did accept part of his request, because he allowed him to get to see the entire Eretz Yisrael,
Right.
but he didn't actually get to go into Eretz Yisrael. So now the question is, the kind of the whole idea here is that what allowed Moshe, Hashem, it's kind of like this back and forth between what Hashem and Moshe kind of had, I don't want to say conversation, but what kind of tipped the scale so that Hashem would say, yes, Moshe, I'll let you come into at least see Eretz Yisrael. So it says, if you look at the Gemara, so the Gemara says like this, Brachot in Perek Hey, it says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Gedolat Tfilah yoter mima'asim tovim, she'en gadol b'ma'asim tovim yoter mimoshe Rabbeinu, alav ha'shalom, v'af al pi chen lo na'ana el b'tfilah, she'nemar al tosef daver elai, u'smich le alei rosh ha'piska. This is again Drush Bet. So it says like this. The Gemara says that in the 5th chapter of Masechet Brachot, it says, Rabbi Elazar says that the tefillah is greater than Masim Tovim, because we know that there's no one who did more, performed no greater deed than Moshe Rabbeinu, And even so, it was answered only through the tefillah. And as it says, the pasuk says, "Al tosef daber elai," right? Don't stop davening, if you will, right? Usmichla, and then right afterwards it says, "Alei rosh hapiska," come up, right? And come up, and you'll be able to see, at least see Eretz Yisrael. Obviously, Hashem was unwilling to allow Moshe to go into Eretz Yisrael, but at least that is through the tefillah, that is through this davening. Hashem didn't allow Moshe to go into Eretz Yisrael, but his davening, we always view it as Hashem said no, right? Abayit Chanan, and then Hashem said stop, don't do it anymore. Here, the Zera Shimshon is saying is no. Moshe said, I want to go in. Hashem said, you know what? I don't, and then we always say, well, maybe Moshe's davening was useless, right? But here he's saying is no. Hashem said, I'm not going to let you in, but I'm not saying no completely, right? We always say no, right? He said no. No, I'm giving you part of your davening is you want to see Eretz Yisrael. So I'm giving you that little piece.
So I understood something very interesting. I'm sure I read it somewhere. When he says Al Tosef Daber Lai Od, it's basically because if you would have continued,
right,
you'd have no choice but to let him in.
Right.
So he basically said to him, don't daven more because
right,
you're going to be cornering me.
Right, exactly. So here he's trying to say is what is here he says, but in the merit of the zchut of the tefillah that he did have, Hashem says, you know what? I'm not going to let you in, but I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you a piece of it. I'm going to give you a piece of the tefillah. So it says, v'chatua. So the Tosfot there asks a question: Idolat tefillah imasim tovim below tefillah. Right? The Gemara, when the Gemara says that tefillah is greater than ma'asim tovim, it means that tefillah is greater than ma'asim tovim when the ma'asim tovim are not accompanied by tefillah. Meaning that if I just do chesed all day, it's good, it's great. But I need to have the chesed has to be kind of buffered with or something supported with tefillah. When I have tefillah and chesed or masim tovim, let's use the word masim tovim, right? When I have tefillah and masim tovim, it's much better than just having masim tovim. Okay, obviously I'm not belittling masim tovim here, but that's what the Tosfot said.
Better than having just tefillah.
Right, exactly. So this is what he's saying here. Now look, Gemara now ask a few questions on what Tosfot and the Gemara, and once we get there, you're going to see this, I think, a nice little piece about what the power of tefillah. It says here, Makshim, the Gemara, the many Mefarshim asked the question, how does Rabbi Eliezer say that tefillah is greater? The whole Gemara is based on the fact that davening is greater than masim tovim. How do we know that? Where do we get that? Dilma shavim, maybe they're equal. How do we know? Look, the reason is Moshe was not answering until what? He actually davened. Right? Mishum de maasim tovim lechod, right? Lo sagi, because just the maasim tovim, just the good deeds alone was not sufficient. V'gam betfilah lechod lo sagi, and also, right? Tefillah alone was obviously not sufficient. So adika tarti v'hadi v'adadi, right? Therefore, must be present. Meaning, maybe it was Moshe's tefillah and with maasim tovim that Hashem said, umin alam de gedola tefillah yoter maasim. How do we know? Therefore, maybe because he needed both, it's proof that we need both, and not that we say, why does Rabbi Eliezer say one is greater than the other, right? Maybe we need both, right? So he says like this. And the second question about this whole Gemara, and the Odik Shif Aksha Rif, and indeed the Rif does actually mention this in the Ein Yaakov. He says, Sheiniach hara'aya ikarit, right? That Rabbi Eliezer disregarded the first thing, which is that Moshe wanted to see Eretz Yisrael. Right? Shehi v'etchanan el Hashem. Right? Basically, what happens is Rabbi Eliezer says, what does Rabbi Eliezer say? He says, I'm just going to skip the fact that Moshe really wanted to do is see Eretz Yisrael. I'm just going to skip that part. I'm going to go, kind of skip that part. And then Shehi v'etchanan el Hashem. And after, since it says, go up to the top of the mountain. The first part of the pasuk says that he wanted to go see the Eretz Yisrael, and then the second one is that he says that Hashem says, "Okay, I'll let you see
from afar."
Right, from afar. Right. If you look at the pasuk, Kisham ne'emar al tosef daber elai. What is the pasuk that Rabbi Elazar brings? Rabbi Elazar brings the pasuk that says al tosef. Don't stop. So he's saying I don't understand if the pasuk is. If the whole point of Moshe's davening was to go into Eretz Yisrael, then why bring a proof from Al Tosef, right? In other words, that's the opposite of what Moshe was trying to do. So the Rif is saying is, if it implies that the pasuk says that he didn't hear, because that he didn't accept, that Hashem didn't accept Moshe's tefillah. Why? He says, Al Tosef, I don't want to do it anymore. Right? So why would Rabbi Lazar choose the question is, the Rif is asking a question, where the Zera Shimshon is quoting the Rif that says, why would Moshe, why would Rabbi Lazar bring a pasuk that is from the source of Al Tosef? Don't stop davening, right? Because that would imply the opposite, which we're trying to get to. And he says that furthermore, it says is when we look at the Tosfot, he says is that it says referring to Masim Tovim without tefillah. There's also a question. Demai kasha lehu shepirshu kain. So he says here, what was Tosfot bothered by it, and they daha pshita gdolat tefillah masim tovim ayri below tefillah. It's obvious that prayer is davening is greater than masim tovim. Is greater than masim tovim without tefillah. How could one think that is discussing just masim tovim and tefillah? How could we say? How could one actually think that discussing masim tovim with tefillah that would mean that one of them is greater, right? So I could obviously not say that tefillah alone is greater than a tefillah with masim tovim, because so it would really, what he's saying is that Tosfot doesn't make any sense. Because how could we say that it's greater than? If we say something is greater than we know, let's say, right, it says Gedolat tefillah mi masim tovim. How could we say, right, by saying that, we're saying that one is greater than the other? Obviously, if you say 1 + 1 = 2, then 1 alone is not enough, right? So that how could we say, how could the Tosfot even be asking the question?
Maybe you'll get to
Right,
it,
yeah.
is the Masim Tovim isn't even mentioned
So he's going
in
to get
any of the discussion.
He's going to get that in a second.
Meaning,
Yeah.
You're basically saying, who brought that into the equation?
Exactly.
At all?
He's going to ask it right now. Here, look. Here you go. Look. He says.
Oh, okay.
He says here. Next, he says now he's going to give. He's going to say he's now going to start. The Zera Shimshon is now going to give his kind of start off his answer by saying let's look at what was Rabbi Lazar trying to get to, and he says today's the kdik. Mat tzorach lo lavi raya shegdolat tefillah mimasim tovim mimoshe Rabbeinu, v'lo hu davar baruch hakadosh baruch hu shomea tefillat kol peh v'af mino nochrim v'ganava apu machtarta rachmana kare. So he says there's no greater. We have to look. Why does Lazar have to bring proof from Moshe Rabbeinu that tefillah is greater than ma'asim tovim? Right? Isn't it obvious that there's tefillah is actually very strong, very heavyweighted, and we know we say every day. What do we say? Shomea tefillat kol peh. Right? It says even from non-Jews we hear tefillah. Even tefillah from non-Jews is valuable. Right? Right? Even a thief, right? Even a thief, right? Even a person who's davening, we know, like there's, I think it's in the Gemara. He's going to quote it. The Gemara says that I believe it's the Ganava Apu Machtarta Rachmanikar. Even a robber, right? And at the open of the tunnel, he's about to go into someone's house and he's about to break in. And he says, "Hashem, please give me, let me strike." Doesn't that sound kind of obvious? Like that sounds counterintuitive? No, Hashem still listens to him, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu Shomea Tfilato Afa Pishu Rasha. Even though Hashem knows that this person is a Rasha, right? His tefillot is heard. So clearly, anyone who's davening has some sort of relationship.
Meaning it's better to give a proof from the lower end.
Right, exactly. V'ilu b'masim tovim, and in case of masim tovim, tzarich sheyeh malei mitzvot masim tovim. This person has to be filled with mitzvot in order to really create a connection with Hashem. Right, like you said, the lower one, if you will, kind of thing is. Why bring proof from the higher one? Rather, you should be bringing proof from right, exactly. So he says here, right. So he says here, as without the mitzvot, he basically saying is that because you had less masim tovim, so then you would be mivatel. Like in other words, I don't have enough masim tovim, so I don't get the merit. So he says here, and therefore he would say since is clearly greater. Since we're saying is that maybe that the masim tovim, maybe I don't have enough masim tovim, and therefore I'm not merit to get Hashem's attention, if you will. Right. So he's saying is what. So therefore he's saying is that clearly that tefillah is clearly greater than Masim Tovim, because tefillah anyone can listen to. Hashem listens to any of his tefillot, right? Rabbi
Why
Lazar.
did he bring Moshe?
Right. So therefore, therefore he's saying is that tefillah is clearly greater than Masim Tovim. That we understand that it's not that Rabbi Lazar is teaching is that because what Rabbi Lazar is saying is that tefillah is I'm not saying easier, but tefillah is something that everyone is like the baseline is pretty much equal for everyone, right? When Masim Tovim, you have to say is my bar is much higher because I have to bank in a lot of merit to get a lot of Masim Tovim to get the zchut. But tefillah, everyone can do, right? Even the robber who's about to break into someone's house, he's hurt. He's also hurt too. So here he's saying is that it's not that it's literally greater, but the power is, the power of tefillah is easier, if you will, and the baseline is there. Now he says, but and this is what really is the beautiful part. He says, let's try to re-understand what Rabbi Lazar is saying. We must say shekavanat Rabbi Lazar hi lomar shegdolat tefillah levada yoter mim kol ha'masim tovim shebalam chutz mitefillah. He's saying is what Rabbi Lazar is trying to say, and this is Zera Shimshon is kind of reinterpreting what Rabbi Lazar is saying is that tefillah on its own is greater, right? Which is more than all the Masim Tovim in the world combined when they are without tefillah. V'zeu shekatvu atosot below tefillah. Meaning, Rabbi Lazar does not mean to say that the zchut of tefillah with the zchut of other mitzvot, nor is he saying is that the connection of Hashem, that they provide. But what he's saying is that that tefillah has a unique ability to bring forth like a better response, which is not there with any other part of any other mitzvah. And in fact, I just heard I'm going to give a little plug for if you want to hear. I mean, Rav Biederman is he speaks wonderfully all the time, but his Tisha B'Av Shir, this past Tisha B'Av, lasted I think 2.5 to 3 hours long. Wow. I watched every minute of it. He gave at night. He gave like a chizuk shir about like what we should be thinking about and things like that. His shir was unbelievable. Like it was just I wanted
Monday night?
On Monday night. Yeah, he gave one on Monday night. It was absolute. I mean, it's in Hebrew, so it's a little. But most of it was stories, to be honest. But it was absolutely just like you were just taking in. And one of the things he said is that the power of tefillah that we have to right, or sad stuff. So he was trying to focus on improving our interpersonal relationships with people and improving our understanding of how we should be much more what he called, he said ahavat chinam, baseless love.
I know. And also, like, I was reading this magazine, I was just aware that during 9 days, when you're allowed to cook like meat and taste it and then spit it out.
Yeah, yep.
I didn't even know that. I'm like,
okay, so anyways, we're going to continue. But what he said is that the power. He said that many people. What he was saying is that. Why did I mention it? He mentioned, Biederman mentioned that he says that some people daven for the sake of just like it's part of their daily routine, and some people daven because he said is they wish they all know that their whole routine is based on their davening. Meaning, some people just say, okay, davening, go to work, go pick up the kids, whatever it is, and some people say is I've got a list of things to do, but my whole day is based on how my davening comes out, like how I daven. So he says is that one of the things that if we spent enough time in davening, our whole day would be different. Meaning that we understood how powerful davening really is. We'd change the amount of time that we spend davening to really give ourselves the best outcome of the day.
so why don't we?
That's what he was saying. He's saying that we should be davening more, taking more time. He wasn't saying it as a way, right? We should spend more time. Anyway, so he's anyway, so he says, therefore, he says it's meaning that people who perform the mitzvot, right? There was a person I perform, there are a lot of people we know, they perform a lot of great mitzvot, but their davening is, less than good, right? So he says, that's what Rabbi Lazar is saying, is that even the great merit, even the mitzvot that we do, have a lot of merit, a lot of spiritual.
Less than good.
Well, he's saying he's not. I'm not saying that. He's saying I'm not saying. God forbid. I'm not a person to tell you who's good or who's not good. God, I will never say that. I would never say that. I would never have the guts to say that. But he does that. What he's saying is that you're expecting. There's a lot. There are a lot of. Let's just put it this way. There are a lot of things that we expect. Hashem said, Hashem, I daven. I do all these great things, right? I do all these great things. I give tzedakah. I visit the sick. I do whatever it is. And then your davening is 5 minutes long. And you're like, well, I'll just bank. I'm going to bank all my merit on the mitzvot, right? So he's saying this. No. Don't bank your mitzvot. Don't bank because you just did. I gave $1,000 and everyone's. I went to visit sick people the whole day or whatever. I gave out
You ever
food.
see a lot of those people that are like millionaires, right? They barely daven, right?
Right. So anyway, so what I think. Right. So anyway, so again, he does mention in the previous Torah, in a different Torah, he mentions the fact that sometimes we don't. In one of the Torahs that he mentions.
There's 4 guys on the block. There's a black like that.
So first of all, in a previous Torah that we mentioned earlier today, he said is some things we just don't understand God's ways, and therefore we can't understand why God put certain people in certain situations. That being said, like I said, is who am I or who are we to judge or understand how much time and how much tefillah each person's weighed? But he definitely. But if I had to kind of summarize, right? Yeah. He says, "Mishum hachi tzarach lavi raya davka Moshe." He said that's why you have to bring, and I'm going to get to why he brings specifically Moshe, is that in order to get to kind of get the response that we need, that Moshe wanted, right? In order to get the response that we kind of want, if you will. I'm not here to say whose tefillah is longer, whose tefillah is shorter, and what the power of each davening is. But I think he's saying is that davening is that, the great equalizer, if you will. We usually say that davening, the mitzvot are the ones that kind of, you say, wow, that person's, chesed is unbelievable. And then the davening is a little bit lacking or something like that. We say, wait a minute, I don't see him at shul every day, or who knows what they're, but you don't know what their davening is like. And he's saying is that, but one thing was for sure, what Rav Elazar is saying is, or Zera Shimshon is saying, what Rav Elazar is saying is that the power of tefillah is really great, and we should be taking more time to really, if we really want something to happen, it's not only the other mitzvot, but rather the ability for us to daven really gives us that that power. That something that.
Why does he still bring Moshe?
So he's got to. Here he says, "Mishum hachi," and it's for this reason that Rav Elazar brought proof from Moshe. Why? V'diek shaper lo mashe en lecha gadol ma'asim tovim yoter Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom v'af al pi chen lo nana ela b'tfilah. He says Rav Elazar was saying that there is more. Tefillah is more effective than all the mitzvot combined. And if you look at the words, there's no greater person. What was the ultimate chesed or ma'asim tovim, ma'aseh tov that Moshe did? He literally did everything for Am Yisrael and nothing for himself. Right? All the ma'asim in the world, Moshe says, even if you look at Rashi, just without this whole Torah,
Discussion.
right? Rashi says on Vayet Hanan, he says, I don't want to be the one saying, I want to cash in on all my chips right now, right? Moshe will never want to be all the tzaddikim. I think he quotes Rashi there. Quotes saying is the tzaddikim never want to cash in on chips and saying is I did all this greatness, so therefore I want to get therefore Hashem give me what I want. No. So he's saying is even if we look just at Rashi, right? Rashi himself is saying is Moshe didn't want to say Hashem, I spent the last 40 years in the desert doing all these things for people. And now it's my turn to ask for something. No, he can't. He didn't want to do that because that would be, an almost unfair request. So he's saying back to Zera Shimshon, he's saying is, it's the davening, it's the tefillah. It's not the masim tovim that Moshe did this whole time. It's the davening itself that actually, kind of changed Hashem, if you will, changed Hashem's mind. So now he says but he says, V'nei b'tfilato shel Moshe. Now if we look at the tefillah of Moshe, and over here, it's literally exactly what I forgot that he even mentions it. K'tiv v'etchanan Hashem, u'perish Rashi, Afa pi sheyesh lam tzadikim litlot b'maasim tovim. Even though the righteous people, the great tzadikim, could say what because of the maasim tovim that we did, we should be getting, right? We always say that, right? Right. Yes, that's a good word. Entitlement, right? Okay, right? Rather, what you're saying is we want something for, I'd rather get it for free. I want Hashem, your chesed, instead of saying is I've been doing chesed and ma'asim tovim all my life. Now Hashem, give me my chip, right? Or I'm cashing in, right? God forbid, a real tzaddik will never say that because he says maybe I didn't do it correctly, maybe my intent wasn't right, maybe whatever the situation was, right? So therefore, now we can understand a new insight into what Hashem's Why Hashem told Moshe to stop davening. V'Hakadosh Baruch Hu amar lo al tosef daber elai. Stop davening. Hashem wanted him to die in the midbar. He didn't want Moshe to continue to learn, to daven, to enter Eretz Yisrael. So as not to diminish the power of tefillah, right? Because he says, right? A person would say that tefillah has no power.
If he would have continued,
Exactly. Hashem
He had no
didn't.
choice.
Exactly. He had no choice. And what would have happened? Everyone says, okay, the power is tefillah has no power, right? Because why? If Hashem says, right, Hashem did not want people to be skeptical of the unique power of tefillah, so he instructed Moshe to stop davening. Mikom makom anabit tefillah. Even so, he had to give a little bit. He just said, your davening was worth something. I don't want to teach you. I don't want you to think that your davening was worthless, right? So I want to give you something. So I'm going to give you a little hint. I'm going to give you a peek, right? I'll give you the sneak peek, but I won't give you the whole show, right? He says, therefore, so as much as he didn't want to decree, he didn't want to kind of contradict himself. Hashem didn't want to say, stop davening, and I didn't want to tell you, no, you can't go into Eretz Yisrael, so I'm going to do something that's like, I'm the gray area, right? I'm telling you stop davening, but I also don't want you to think that you're completely off, right? So I'm giving you something, I'm kind of finding that gray area, right?
because he asked to go in and see.
Right.
So he basically said,
you
you're
don't
not
even
going
go
to
in, but you're going to
still
see it. Exactly. And then Amarlo, Ale Rosh HaPiska, and he says, since it says close to, do not continue, it implies that Hashem said this to Moshe in the merit or the zchut of the tefillah that is. Since Hashem told Moshe to stop davening, so that the people would not question the power of tefillah, it comes out that Al Tosef is actually an indication of the power of the tefillah. Hashem says, we know what the power of tefillah is. What's the power of the tefillah? Because Hashem told Moshe to stop. Because what would have happened? Had Moshe continued, he would have had to answer. And since it's an indication of what the power of tefillah is. But Hashem told Moshe, stop. By telling him to stop, right, we actually understand that this is right by saying Hashem telling Moshe to stop. Right, he actually shows us the actual power of tefillah. So that is, if you will, the end of this drush. The idea is that Hashem tells Moshe, Hashem insists that Moshe stop davening, even though Hashem was allowed to, even though Hashem did allow Moshe to see a piece or from the top of the mountain, he allowed him to see Eretz Yisrael. Hashem showed him the power of tefillah by allowing Moshe to see the land. And he also showed that his insistence that Moshe stop davening, in order so that people will never question the power of tefillah. So what do we learn from here? We learn from here that in the future, what Hashem was trying to do here was to teach us a lesson about the power of tefillah, and so that we wouldn't question the power of tefillah, and also the power of Maasim Tovim. We see that power of tefillah is greater than the power of Maasim Tovim by themselves, but rather tefillah and Maasim Tovim is the ultimate recipe for success. Be'ezrat Hashem, may we continue to understand the power of tefillah, and we continue to perform Maasim Tovim.
We have a beautiful opportunity to support the new shul, the new base of Midrash in Yerushalayim, whereby Yisrael Zilberger and his kollel, he's already there. You go to zerashimshon.com and you go to the donate page, and it's right there. All the information. There's already almost $40,000 raised for it. Another 60,000 on the way, and anyone who's coming to this year is welcome to.
Just another thought. One more thing.
Wonderful donors, as well as our friend who bought pastrami. Mr. Shem, I'll have my turn also. Mr. Shem, and we'll have lots of other people.
Just wanted to say that in a couple of weeks.
Everyone's coming back.
Today we're at the 11th of, or now the 12th of Menachem Av. The Zera Shimshon Yortzeit is on Daled Elul. Yeah. So Rav Zilberberg already. I reached out to Rav Zilberberg. First of all, we're going to be getting more copies of the Zera Shimshon in a couple of days, so that we will have more copies of the Zera Shimshon for more people to come. Second of all, is he tells us on the I think the Daled's Elul. I think we're going to do it Thursday night. I think he said, or Sunday night. I don't remember what night. I think in the new shul. In Yerushalayim is going to be. Yeah, but I don't know if it's in the new shul, the event itself. But he did invite us all to join. He wants us to join, to go to the to the event where they're going to learn, and they're going to have a whole, special Suda and everything else. So just mark your calendars. I'll get the information this week of Bezrat Hashem.
Yes,
Bezrat Hashem. But the idea is to continue it's to show appreciation for Hakar Tov, for the Zera Shimshon himself, and we continue to learn his Torahs.
Amen.
Shabbos.
Shech